I was lying at the bottom of the stairs when I realized I wasn't going to be anyone's mother or grandmother anymore. My hip was screaming, the breath knocked out of me. I'd hit the wall first, then the steps, then the floor. My left arm had taken the worst of it, but it was my pride that stung the most, not just because I had fallen, but because of what happened next. My grandson Jordan stood at the top of the stairs, smirking like he'd won a game. And then, with a laugh that still rings in my ears, he said, "Don't be so dramatic," like it was all a performance, like I wasn't crying real tears. From the kitchen, I heard my daughter call out, not in alarm, not to check on me, but with irritation. "Mom, can you not start something right now? Please." No one came. No one asked if I could stand. I sat there for a long time, too stunned to speak, trying to decide if I was more hurt or ashamed. And that's when I knew. That moment, bruised, aching, and humiliated, wasn't the beginning of a fight. It was the end of something I had refused to admit was already gone. My name is Evelyn. I am 77 years old. I raised a daughter who no longer sees me and a grandson who pushed me down the stairs because I got in his way. And this is the first time I'm telling the truth, not about the fall, but about the life I let crumble beneath it. Before I was anyone's burden, I was someone worth listening to. That's the part I keep circling back to. Long before bruises bloomed on my arms or meals were expected without thanks, I was Evelyn May Turner. A school teacher for 31 years, a wife for 42, a mother for 50. And for every one of those roles, I gave more than I had, believing the giving would come back in time. I met Richard when I was 19. He was quiet, a bit clumsy, with hands too big for his coffee cup and a voice that never rushed. We married a year later, and I thought love meant folding someone else's clothes with care and remembering how they liked their eggs. We didn't have much, but we had enough. He taught shop at the same school where I taught English, and every summer we'd drive to his sister's cabin in Michigan and sit on the dock with our feet in the water, just listening to the world be quiet. When Richard died, it was sudden. A heart attack on a Tuesday morning, just as he was buttoning his shirt. I remember the blue of that shirt more than anything else, how he'd worn it on our 25th anniversary. I didn't cry at the funeral. I made sure the flowers were fresh and the sandwiches were enough, and the eulogy didn't sound like someone reading off a resume. Then I came home to an empty house, folded the shirt he never finished buttoning, and sat down at the kitchen table. I didn't get up for 3 hours. A year later, my daughter Melissa called in tears. She and her husband had split, and she didn't know how she'd afford rent, daycare, or groceries on her own. She said, "Mom, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go." I told her to come home. It wasn't even a question. I emptied out the guest room, moved my sewing machine into the hallway, and put fresh sheets on the bed. When she arrived with baby Jordan in her arms, I believed we were starting over. I thought I was doing what any good mother would do, making room. It started slowly, as these things often do. She said it would be for 6 months, just until she got back on her feet. But time blurred. Jordan turned 2, then 5. I retired early so I could watch him during the day. I used my savings to pay the mortgage. When Melissa picked up more hours at work, I picked up more at home: laundry, dishes, school projects. When the dishwasher broke, I bought a new one. When the roof leaked, I paid the roofer. I never said no. And maybe that was my mistake. I kept thinking if I just gave a little more, they'd notice. That one morning, Melissa would look at me and say, "Thank you for saving us." That Jordan would wrap his arms around me and remember who held him through every fever, every night terror, every scraped knee. But gratitude is a language they never learned to speak. And somewhere along the way, I stopped being Evelyn. I became the background hum in their lives, the one who made things easier without needing to be seen. That was the woman I used to be. She still lived in my bones, quiet and careful, waiting to matter again. It didn't happen all at once. No one wakes up one morning and realizes they've disappeared. It happens in pieces. A forgotten thank you here, a closed door when you're still speaking, a dinner where no one asks how your day was. At first, I told myself it was just the stress. Melissa was working long hours and Jordan was growing, pulling in every direction that preteens do. I excused it. I rationalized it. I forgave what no one ever apologized for. There was a time when Melissa used to ask for my opinion. She'd call me from the grocery store about which brand of detergent to buy or ask if she looked all right before heading out. Over time, she stopped asking. Then she stopped listening. Now she makes decisions for the house without telling me. Paint colors, internet providers, even the brand of coffee we drink. My vote isn't counted because I'm not considered part of the household. I'm just part of the furniture now. When the new couch arrived, I hadn't known they were buying one. The delivery men carried it in, sidestepping the floral armchair I've sat in for 20 years. Melissa told them to take it to the garage. "It's in the way," she said, without looking at me. I stood there watching my chair, my space, get pushed aside like an old suitcase no one travels with anymore. They left it by the water heater. I started eating dinner after they did. Not because they asked me to, but because the dining table filled up with noise and phones and complaints about work and school, and no one seemed to notice if I was there or not. I'd wait until the plates were cleared, then make myself a small plate and sit at the kitchen counter. The silence was easier than the reminder that I was invisible in the noise. Jordan changed too. He used to bring me drawings from school, ask me to help with puzzles, beg for my banana bread. Lately, he just walks past me. He doesn't say good morning, doesn't say good night. Once, he stepped over my laundry basket without even glancing down, like it was mine to carry and his to ignore. The boy I used to rock to sleep now acts like I'm something to avoid, something that slows him down. I found my name crossed off the emergency contact list at his school. Melissa had updated it to include her friend Marcy instead. "You're getting older, Mom," she said when I asked about it. "What if you can't get there in time?" I nodded. I didn't argue. But I felt it like a bruise on my chest. The quiet removal, the assumption of my decline. The worst part wasn't being dismissed. It was realizing how easily they did it. How natural it had become for them to treat me like a relic, something once useful, now just taking up space. No one shouted. No one slammed doors. They just stopped seeing me. And I foolishly kept hoping that if I just stayed useful, they might remember I was still here. When I close my eyes, I can still see him, barefoot on the back porch, cheeks sticky with orange popsicle, holding a dandelion like it was something sacred. Jordan was 4 then, and every morning he would run into my room before I was even out of bed, curl up under the blanket and whisper, "Grandma, are you awake?" Sometimes I'd pretend I was still sleeping just to hear him say it twice. He had this way of wrapping his arms around my neck that made the world feel quiet. Back then, he loved me without thinking about it. It came as naturally as breathing. I was the one who rocked him to sleep when Melissa couldn't, the one who made up stories when he was scared of thunder, who cut the crusts off his sandwiches because he said they tasted like cardboard. I sat through every preschool concert, even when he forgot the words and cried in the middle of Twinkle, Twinkle. I was always the one waiting outside with juice and a hug. He used to reach for my hand just to feel my fingers between his. That kind of love, I thought, was unbreakable. But children change. They grow into their own minds, and sometimes they grow into the behaviors they see more than the values they were taught. I started noticing little things with Jordan, small dismissals, rolled eyes, the way he'd snatch the remote from my lap without asking. I chalked it up to adolescence. Boys that age, I told myself, can be moody and clumsy with their feelings. I believed it would pass. Then came the tone, the kind of voice that carries sarcasm instead of curiosity. He started calling me old lady in a way that didn't sound like a joke. One afternoon, I reminded him to take his shoes off at the door, and he muttered, "Why do you care? You barely leave the house." Melissa heard him, looked up from her phone, and said nothing. Just let the moment settle like dust no one planned to clean up. That night, I lay in bed and tried to remember the last time he'd hugged me. Not out of obligation, but with real feeling. I couldn't. What I could remember was the sharpness in his voice when I asked him to put his dishes in the sink, the way he huffed when I offered to help with homework, the flat eyes he gave me when I said I was proud of him. He didn't need me anymore. But it wasn't just need that had vanished. It was care. It was respect. I once believed that love planted early in life would grow stronger with time, but love, I've learned, can wither when it goes unwatered. And I was the only one pouring into this garden while the others watched from the shade. Jordan wasn't always cruel, but cruelty doesn't need a history to hurt. It only needs a moment, a push, a laugh, a voice that says, "Don't be so dramatic," while you're lying in pain. And a silence from the kitchen that tells you louder than any words that no one is coming to help. For 3 days after the fall, I stayed mostly in my room. My hip ached badly, and there was a sickly yellow bruise blooming across my left thigh. Each step hurt, but I said nothing. I waited to see if anyone would knock on my door, if Jordan or Melissa might feel a flicker of guilt or even curiosity about whether I could walk properly. No one did. The house moved on as if I didn't exist, as if my pain were a private inconvenience that shouldn't disturb their rhythm.
On the second day, I heard Jordan stomping around upstairs, playing music loud enough to shake the light fixtures. Melissa shouted up at him to lower it, but not once did she come in to check if I needed anything.
I tried to stretch my leg and felt a jolt shoot down my side. I winced and breathed through it, reminding myself that I had lived through childbirth, cancer, and now this. I would survive, but I would not forget. By the third evening, I made it to the bathroom and stood in front of the mirror, staring at the lines on my face. They were deeper than I remembered. I looked tired in a way that makeup couldn't fix, the kind of tired that settles into your bones when you've been ignored long enough to wonder if your existence even matters. I sat back down at the edge of the bed, opened the drawer of my nightstand, and took out the small spiral notebook where I kept household information. Every bill, every account, every login, and password was in there. My name was on every deed. I had paid off the mortgage 15 years ago using my retirement savings. They never asked how. They just assumed the house was theirs, that it had always been a given. I sat there, flipping through pages, and realized something simple and cold. Everything they relied on still ran through me. I hadn't said a word to them since the fall, and they didn't seem to notice. That silence gave me time to think, time to remember the years I had traded away for them. I thought about the groceries I bought, the clothes I folded, the school supplies I packed for Jordan year after year. I thought about Melissa's quiet expectations, how she had come to see my love as a service, one that was required but never reciprocated. Later that night, I opened my laptop and searched for an attorney. Not for drama, not for revenge, just for clarity. I found someone local with good reviews. I booked the appointment under my maiden name and marked it in the corner of my calendar with a single dot. No one would notice. They hadn't looked at my calendar in years. As I shut the laptop, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Not power, not yet, but presence. Like I had finally stepped back into my own life after years of standing just outside it, waiting for permission to be seen. The first morning I didn't make breakfast, the silence in the kitchen felt like something had broken. Normally, by 7, I would be standing by the stove, frying eggs or warming up oatmeal, depending on the day. Toast would be stacked on a plate, orange juice poured, coffee brewing. But that morning, I stayed in bed. I listened to the creak of floorboards, the sound of Jordan stomping down the stairs. And then the pause. A beat of confusion, maybe. Then came the fridge door, then cabinets opening and slamming shut. No one called my name. No one came upstairs to ask where breakfast was. The house just moved on. Melissa texted me from downstairs. Not a knock, not a question, just a message. No eggs? I stared at it for a full minute before putting the phone face down on the nightstand. I wasn't sick. I wasn't angry. I had simply decided that I was done. Done performing the daily rituals of care for people who treated that care like background noise. I let them figure out their own meals, let them wash their own dishes, find their own socks, and scrub their own burnt pans. That same day, I stopped folding laundry. The baskets in the hallway began to overflow, and still, no one asked why. I overheard Melissa on the phone with a friend, complaining about how hard it was to manage everything. "It's like I have to do everything myself," she said, while sitting in a home I maintained, using appliances I had paid for, drinking coffee brewed in a machine I bought. I went about my days more quietly than before and with more purpose. I began clearing out old drawers in my bedroom, sorting papers that had been collecting dust. My will, my bank statements, the title of the house, everything was carefully organized and placed into a folder labeled Final Decisions. It was strange how calm I felt. There was no rage behind it, only a deep sense of acceptance. If I couldn't make them see my worth through kindness, I would let them feel it through my absence. In the evenings, I sat on the porch. I watched the wind move through the trees and let the quiet hold me. Jordan walked past me once without a word, his face lit by the glow of his phone. Melissa drove in late, too tired to look up from the steering wheel. Inside, the sink piled up with dishes. The trash wasn't taken out. The floors grew dusty. Slowly, the house began to reflect the people inside it, untended, cluttered, indifferent. They didn't notice that I had stopped cooking. They noticed that dinner was missing. They noticed the discomfort, not the disappearance. That was always the way with them. They saw the problem, never the person. And so, I gave them what they had already treated me as. A shadow, a silence, an empty plate. It was a Tuesday morning when I slipped out of the house with my handbag and a folder tucked under my arm. I told no one where I was going. Melissa was still asleep. Jordan was glued to his computer. I didn't leave a note, didn't call out goodbye. I simply locked the door behind me and walked down the driveway with the slow, steady pace of someone who had nothing left to prove. The lawyer's office was only a 15-minute ride by cab. I had chosen the firm carefully, reading reviews, checking credentials, making sure the person I spoke to would treat me with dignity, not as some confused old woman trying to stir up drama. Her name was Rena Morales. She looked no older than 40, sharp but warm, with eyes that paid attention and hands that never stopped taking notes. She greeted me kindly and asked if I wanted tea. I declined. I had come with purpose, and I didn't want to be softened by hospitality. I told her everything. Not just about the fall, but about the years that led to it. About how I had paid off the house, about the bills that bore only my name, about the silence that had filled my days like fog. I watched her face as I spoke, and I could see it. She believed me. Rena walked me through the steps, updating my will, changing power of attorney, removing Melissa as a beneficiary. She asked if I wanted to leave anything to Jordan. I paused. Then I said I wanted to leave him something, yes, but not money. I wanted to leave him a letter, one I would write myself. She nodded and made a note. She never questioned me. Not once did she suggest I should reconsider or think about what my family might feel. She understood this wasn't about revenge. It was about being seen, heard, counted. We spent 2 hours together that morning. I signed documents with a steady hand, reviewed property titles, and set in motion the quiet unraveling of every assumption my daughter and grandson had built their lives on. By the time I left, I felt like a different version of myself, not someone new, but someone I had once been, long before I was buried under other people's needs. When I returned home, no one noticed I had been gone. The kitchen was a mess. Jordan had left his cereal bowl on the counter, milk congealing at the edges. Melissa was arguing on the phone in the living room, her voice sharp and tired. I walked past them both and into my room, closed the door, and sat in the chair by the window. There were still steps ahead of me, plans to finalize, things to put in motion. But for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for someone to ask how I was doing. I already knew the answer. I was preparing to leave, not in anger, but in clarity. And this time, they wouldn't see me coming. It was the last normal thing I did in that house. I walked to the corner market on a bright Thursday morning and bought only what I needed for myself. Nothing more. No family packs of chicken, no bulk cereal for Jordan, no extra milk. I picked up 2 cans of soup, a loaf of bread, a small jar of peanut butter, and a few apples. Enough to get me through the next few days without drawing attention. I paid in cash. I didn't want anything traced back to me once I left. On the way home, I stopped at the bank and withdrew a modest sum. Not from the main accounts, just a quiet little savings account I had kept since Richard passed. It wasn't much by most standards, but it was mine. Mine alone. The kind of money you don't talk about because it's not for extras or gifts. It's for when you finally admit no one else is coming to save you. When I got home, the house felt more unfamiliar than ever. Jordan was sprawled across the couch, game controller in hand, shouting at some invisible opponent. Melissa was on the phone in the kitchen, her voice sharp, annoyed, pacing in circles while ignoring the growing pile of dishes behind her. No one looked up when I walked in. No one asked where I had been. I took my small bag of groceries to my room, closed the door, and began the quiet process of separating myself from everything they had come to rely on. That night, I didn't eat with them. I didn't even go downstairs. I made myself a sandwich, poured a glass of water, and sat by the window as the sun disappeared behind the trees. I listened to the muffled sounds of the house, Jordan laughing, Melissa complaining, cabinet doors slamming, and I thought, this is the last time I will hear this noise from this side of the wall. I had already arranged the place I would move to. A small, furnished unit in a quiet senior complex across town. Nothing grand, just clean, private, and mine. Rena had helped me fast-track the paperwork. The deposit had been paid. The move was scheduled. I told no one. I began packing in secret. Just a suitcase and 2 boxes. The rest could stay behind. The photos of Richard came with me. The notebooks, the papers, the folder of documents. Everything else. The cookware, the framed quotes Melissa never read, the couch I never chose, was theirs now. Let them deal with the clutter of a life they took for granted. The next morning I woke up early and made one final sweep of the room. I didn't leave a note. I didn't owe them one. They had stopped asking questions a long time ago, and I had stopped offering answers. The fridge was nearly empty. The pantry half-stocked with things no one knew how to turn into meals. I left the keys on the kitchen table beside a cold coffee cup and a stack of unpaid bills. By the time the sun rose over the roof, I was gone. Quietly, completely, and without explanation. The house would wake without me. Let them feel the weight of absence in every corner. Let them see what a day looks like when I am no longer there to hold it together. It didn't take long for the silence to turn into noise. By noon on the day I left, Melissa had called me 4 times. I let the phone ring each time, then turned it off completely. No voicemails, no explanations. I imagined her standing in the kitchen, phone in hand, waiting for me to come through the door with bags of groceries or a warm excuse. But there was nothing coming. Not this time. By evening, the calls turned to texts. First casual, then concerned. "Mom, where are you?" Followed by, "Can you just let me know if you're okay?" I read each one from the screen of the small prepaid phone I had bought the week before. I did not respond. I didn't feel cruel. I felt clear. They had never asked if I was okay when I was under their roof. Now they would feel what it meant to live without my invisible hand smoothing over every wrinkle in their lives. That night, I sat in the living room of my new place. It was quiet, but not lonely. The furniture wasn't mine, but it was clean and untouched by years of other people's chaos. I made myself tea and sat near the window watching the lights of the building across the way blink on one by one. It felt strange at first, not to be needed. But it was a kind of strangeness I welcomed, like air rushing into a room that had been sealed shut. Back at the house, things were beginning to unravel. Melissa called my sister in Florida, then the church I hadn't attended in years. I had left no breadcrumbs. Jordan texted once, a single word, "Grandma," and nothing more. I stared at that word for a long time. It was the first time he had addressed me directly in weeks. It wasn't affection. It was panic. He had never once thanked me for anything, but now he was wondering where the person who filled in all the blanks had gone. The next day, the power was shut off. I had canceled the autopay from my bank account the week before. Melissa must have realized too late that the bills were not in her name. The food in the fridge began to spoil. The trash piled up. She tried calling the utility companies, but they wouldn't speak to her. She wasn't the account holder. She was just someone who had lived in a house without understanding how it stood. I pictured them both sitting in the dark, trying to figure out what to do next. I pictured the confusion turning into resentment, the blame shifting from one to the other, both of them missing the point. I had been their foundation, quietly holding everything in place. Now that I had stepped away, the cracks were showing. They didn't know where I was. They didn't know how to reach me. And for the first time, they were realizing that the woman they had dismissed as frail, forgetful, and convenient had been the one keeping their world from falling apart. Let them sit in that silence. Let them learn to miss what they thought would never leave. The messages came in waves. At first, they were soft, almost polite, as if Melissa still believed I was simply out running errands or taking a spontaneous trip. "Mom, are you okay?" Followed by, "Please just text me back so I know you're safe." I let them sit in the inbox untouched. My phone buzzed every few hours like a heartbeat pulsing from a place I had left behind. By the third day, the tone changed. Melissa's words grew sharper, more demanding. "I don't know what game you're playing, but this isn't funny. We need you to come home." Jordan didn't text again. Not once. I suspected he was waiting for his mother to fix it, to restore the order of things like I had always done for him. Maybe he thought I'd be back by the weekend carrying groceries and acting like nothing had happened. That's what they were used to. My silence resetting everything. But this time, silence wasn't submission. It was a wall. I listened to some of the voicemails. Melissa's voice cracked halfway through one of them. She sounded more tired than I'd ever heard her. "I can't get the internet working, Mom. The power's still out. I don't know who to call. I didn't even know the water bill came through your name." Her words trailed off into static, like she couldn't believe what she was admitting. Still, I didn't respond. They had built their comfort on the quiet work I did behind the scenes. Every bill paid, every repair scheduled, every fridge stocked. I had erased myself from their story so effectively that they never considered what it would mean if I walked away. Now they were seeing the gaps, not just in the bank accounts or the pantry, but in themselves. I played one final voicemail before deleting them all. Melissa's voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't realize how much you were doing. I didn't mean for it to get like this." There was a pause, then, "Please come home. Jordan misses you." That was the moment I cried, not because of what she said, but because it had taken this much absence, for her to see me. Her apology wasn't enough. Not after years of disregard, but it was the first honest thing she had given me in a long time. I held the phone in my hand, stared at the screen glowing in the dim light of my new living room, and then powered it off. I wasn't angry. I had no desire to punish them. I just didn't want to go back to being invisible. That night, I opened the notebook I had brought with me and began writing a letter to Jordan. Not to scold him, not to shame him, just to tell the truth about who I was, what I had done for him, and what happens when kindness is mistaken for weakness. The phone stayed off. The house they relied on stayed quiet. And for the first time, I was listening only to myself. When I was a little girl, my father used to say, "If your name's on it, it's yours to protect or walk away from." I never thought much about that until I was sitting across from Rena again, watching her finalize the paperwork to put my house on the market. Not Melissa's house, not Jordan's, mine. Every nail, every shingle, every light bulb had my name behind it. And now I was choosing what to do with it. Not out of anger, but because I could. The real estate agent came by on a quiet Thursday afternoon. She was polite, professional, and tactful. She asked about the condition of the roof, the age of the appliances, and whether I'd want to leave any furnishings. I told her to sell it as is. I didn't want anything from that house. The agent glanced around the living room, nodding thoughtfully, unaware of the years of labor and silence soaked into the walls. She didn't know this was the house where I held my grandson through sleepless nights, or where I bandaged my own bruises in secret. She just saw square footage and potential. Within a week, offers started coming in. The market was good, and the house was in a desirable neighborhood. I accepted an offer from a young couple with 2 toddlers and a dog. I liked the thought of laughter returning to that place, laughter that didn't come at someone else's expense, laughter that wasn't soaked in entitlement. When the final documents were signed, I stood in my new kitchen, holding the check in my hands. It wasn't about the money. It was about the closing of a door that should have been closed years ago. I deposited the funds into an account with only my name on it and used a portion to secure the lease on my small apartment. The rest, I let sit quietly, untouched. It felt good, knowing I had a cushion that no one could tap, no one could expect or depend on. Just me, securing my peace. I took a bus to the cemetery that Sunday. Richard's name was still crisp on the headstone. I brought a single yellow rose and knelt beside him. The grass was damp, and the wind was steady. I told him everything, about the fall, about the silence, about the decision I had made to finally choose myself. I didn't cry. I just spoke to him as if he were listening, as if the man who once shared coffee and crossword puzzles with me would be proud that I had finally stepped back into my own life. As I sat there, I realized that love doesn't die. It waits. Sometimes it waits inside you for decades until you're strong enough to claim it again. The house was never just a building. It was my offering, my sacrifice. And now it would be someone else's fresh start. Let them walk through those doors and feel the warmth of new beginnings. I had already found mine. Some people think reclaiming your dignity means standing in the center of a room and shouting until everyone hears you, but I've learned that dignity is quieter than that. It doesn't need noise. It doesn't need applause. It lives in the choices you make when no one is looking, in the way you decide not to return to places that have chipped away at your worth. I did not scream. I did not argue. I simply left. And I took myself with me. In the days that followed the sale of the house, I settled into my new routine. My mornings began with a walk through the small garden behind the apartment building. The flowers weren't fancy, just a scatter of marigolds and lavender, but they smelled like peace. I greeted the neighbors politely, kept to myself, and found comfort in being surrounded by people who didn't expect anything from me. For once, my presence didn't come with a list of tasks.
I visited the library twice a week, something I hadn't done in years. I picked up novels without worrying about who needed dinner or what bills needed paying. I sat on park benches and watched strangers pass, imagining the lives they were returning to. No one knew me here, and that, I discovered, was a gift. I was not someone's mother, someone's grandmother, or someone's unpaid servant. I was Evelyn, and that was enough. I wrote the letter to Jordan, folded it neatly, and left it in Rena's care. If he ever reached out again, if he truly wanted to understand, she would send it. I didn't write to blame him. I wrote to explain what love looks like when it is given freely, but not returned. I wrote about the difference between being loved and being needed. I hoped that one day he would grow into a man who could tell the difference. Melissa continued to call even weeks after the house was sold. Her messages were longer now, filled with layers of regret, confusion, and disbelief. "I didn't realize how much you were holding together," she said in one voicemail. "I thought you'd always be there." That, I suppose, was the heart of the matter. They thought I would always be there, no matter how they treated me. But I was not infinite. I was not furniture. I was not a ghost to be summoned only when convenient. I am not bitter. I carry no hatred, just clarity. I gave everything I had, not because I was weak, but because I believed in love as an action. And when that action became invisible, when my kindness was folded into the wallpaper of their lives, I chose to stop. Dignity isn't dramatic. It's not loud or cruel. It's choosing to stop explaining yourself to people who never tried to understand you in the first place. And in the quiet of my new life, I found something I had long forgotten how to recognize: freedom. The kind that isn't given, the kind you take back step by step until your own name feels like home again.